Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the dust and sunburnt splendor of the Persian Empire. You're standing at the edge of a long, straight road that stretches farther than your tired eyes can see, shimmering with heat, lined by weathered stones and just a hint of camel. This is the royal road, the express lane of ancient Persia, where couriers once sprinted across deserts, forests, and mountain passes driven by imperial urgency and the quiet promise of a warm, flatbread dinner at the next stop. You're about to tag along? You probably won't survive this. Between the searing heat, the relentless pace, and a travel diet consisting mostly of raisins and goat cheese, your modern-day comforts are going to feel very far away. But that's okay. You're not here to race. You're here to rest. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. I love seeing how global this sleepy caravan has become. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start your walk somewhere between Babylon and Ecbatana, humming along with the rustle of reeds and the soft squelch of sandals. The Royal Road is one of the oldest known long-distance highways laid out during the reign of Darius I around 500 BCE. It runs like a central nervous system across the empire from Susa in the east all the way to Sardis near the Aegean coast. That's about 1,500 miles. In case you're wondering, yes, that is the get blisters in new places kind of distance. It's not paved like Roman roads will later be, but it's smooth, wide, and astonishingly well-maintained, especially when you remember that the Persian Empire was at the time juggling everything from Greek rebels to satraps with personal ambitions and a fondness for extra taxes. But somehow, through a system of imperial edicts and strong coffee, wait, no coffee. Yet they managed to create a logistical masterpiece. As you trudge forward, your feet stirring up sleepy clouds of dust, you pass a mile marker well more like a carved stone stuck in the ground. The Persians weren't obsessed with Roman-style milestones, but they did place signposts and use travel itineraries. Herodotus, the gossipy Greek historian, claimed that the road was so well organized that messages could be delivered in 7 days flat thanks to an endless chain of relay couriers. Historians still argue whether that's an exaggeration or not. 7 days seems suspiciously fast when you consider that even Amazon Prime can't always hit their mark, but it's certain that Persia's communication network was shockingly efficient for its time. You imagine the ancient version of a customer review, message arrived 2 days early, courier only slightly sweaty, 5 stars. A warm breeze drifts in from the south and you smell hints of cumin and something slightly burnt, maybe a roadside fire or just your imagination running wild. You hear the clink of bronze coins in a courier's pouch up ahead, the soft flap of their tunic as they jog steadily along, eyes focused, posture, determined sweat already forming beneath their headband. And they're not alone. The Royal Road isn't just for royal messages. It's shared with merchants hauling dyed fabrics from Bactria priests heading to oracles, nobles pretending they aren't lost, and a few donkeys who refuse to hurry for anyone. You pass by a waystation, a low structure made of sun-dried brick, shaded by a wooden awning. It's quiet now, but once it would have been lively with couriers exchanging satchels, scribes checking clay tablets, and someone muttering about a missing sandal. Inside, you'd find a bed of straw, a jar of cool water, and perhaps, if the previous courier had decent manners, a half-eaten date. The Empire stationed guards and keepers at these posts, ensuring messages kept moving even when people got tired, which they often did. After all, not every postal hero was a tireless superhuman. Some just wanted their feet to stop throbbing. You reach down and pick up a grape that's rolled off a passing cart. It's shriveled now, more raisin than fruit, but you hold it in your palm and wonder how something so small could matter in a system so vast. We'll get to that later. For now, just know that while horses were the flashy transport option, grapes dried, mashed, fermented, or preserved were the secret energy drink of the ancient Persian post. The sun dips lower now. A coppery haze glows at the edges of the hills and shadows stretch across the road like yawns in motion. You feel your shoulders relax, your mind start to drift. You don't need to carry any messages. Just the image of a road that never sleeps and the people who ran across it without complaint. You pass a pair of sandals hanging on a pole, maybe forgotten, maybe left as a joke. You laugh softly. Even in the Empire of Kings, someone had a sense of humor. You keep walking, your steps syncing with the rhythm of the royal road like a slow drumbeat in dust. The sun hasn't quite given up yet. It hangs lazily behind you, casting long shadows of ancient cypress trees. Somewhere far ahead, a courier clutches a tightly rolled letter and curses mildly as a pebble finds its way into his sandal. You nod in silent solidarity. This whole system, this incredible, grape-powered, sandal-wearing, empire-spanning network was the brainchild of one very organized king, Darius the Great. And you have to give him credit. If he were alive today, he'd probably run FedEx 3 podcasts and a thriving Etsy store selling artisan scroll cases. Darius didn't just rule Persia, he managed it. After coming to power in 522 BCE, he realized that his newly expanded empire stretching from the Indus River in the east to the Aegean Sea in the west needed a way to stay stitched together. You can't control that much territory if your only method of communication is yelling across mountaintops or tying notes to particularly well-trained pigeons. No, what he needed was infrastructure. So Darius built roads, canals, granaries, tax offices, and most famously, a postal system that could move faster than the rumors it carried. At the heart of it all was the royal road, a nerve running straight through the body of the empire. The idea was deceptively simple: set up relay stations every 15 to 20 miles. Each station would have fresh horses, rested riders, and maybe a spot to rehydrate and complain about papyrus splinters. When one courier arrived, another would take the message and run to the next stop, shaving precious time off delivery. Herodotus, again, our favorite ancient gossip columnist, wrote that neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. Sound familiar? Yep, that quote was adopted much later by the United States Postal Service, who apparently borrowed more than just the idea. But historians still argue whether Darius's system was truly that consistent. Was it really a well-oiled machine? Or was it more like your uncle's old bicycle? Amazing when it worked, deeply frustrating when it didn't. Evidence shows the relay stations existed, but there's still debate about how fast messages really traveled and whether the horses always got swapped on time or if some couriers just took shortcuts through goat paths. One clay tablet discovered near Persepolis seems to complain about a delayed delivery, though to be fair, it could also just be someone ranting about their cousin's bad handwriting. Context is tricky when your source is 200 to 500 years old and written in cuneiform. Still, the fact remains, Persia had a formalized postal service long before most of the world even considered that your neighbor might want to send a message farther than the next village. You walk in the shadow of that innovation now, the stones whispering tales of scribes, kings, and the occasional bureaucratic meltdown. You reach a rest area, just a cleared patch with worn stones and a half-buried water jar. You imagine a courier plopping down here centuries ago, gulping down sun-warmed water and unwrapping a bundle of dates tied in reed twine. Maybe they pulled out a little square of pressed grape paste, dark, chewy, and energizing. Not quite a protein bar, but it did the job. That grape paste, often made by boiling grapes down into a thick, concentrated block, was one of the more portable energy sources in the ancient world. Easy to carry, resistant to spoilage, and weirdly delicious when eaten with salted goat cheese. And no, you can't DoorDash it. As you sit there surrounded by dry wind and the occasional sleepy buzz of insects, you feel the scale of Darius's ambition. His empire wasn't just about conquest, it was about connection. A message that started in the palace at Susa could be in Sardis within a week. That meant decisions could be made faster, rebellions could be crushed sooner, and birthday scrolls could arrive on time, probably. You run your fingers along a rock, imagining the thousands of hands that pass this way, callous, dusty, trembling after long hours of running. A courier's life was not glamorous, but it was essential. You spot hoof prints in the hard soil, Horses were the premium option used mostly for urgent, high-priority dispatches, but not every courier had access to one, and some sections of the road weren't ideal for riding, so a surprising number of messengers did the whole thing on foot. That's right, you're walking the same path some couriers once ran barefoot or in sandals carrying wax-sealed scrolls or clay tablets, and they did it without hydration packs or Spotify playlists. What drove them? Duty mostly, fear occasionally, and perhaps the pride of being part of something bigger, a living connection stretching across mountains and deserts through cities and silence. You hear distant laughter, probably a figment of your sleepy mind, and imagine a group of messengers gathered at a relay post comparing stories, sharing gossip from different corners of the empire. Did you hear what the satrap of Lydia did at the banquet, one might say, licking grape juice off their fingers? Tried to toast with goat's milk. Again. The road was a web, and couriers were its nerves. Messages pulsed through them. Orders, edicts, rumors, love letters, all of it moved faster than most people thought possible. And now, here you are, halfway between dreams and history, wrapped in the quiet hum of the desert wind, the crunch of sandals and dust, and the memory of a king who believed even empires needed mailmen. Your sandals sink a little deeper into the dust now. The road is still smooth, but the ground feels a bit looser, the wind slower. Maybe it's just the fatigue settling into your calves, or maybe it's the sensation of stepping into the quiet routine of an ancient Persian courier's daily life. You're not racing, you're just going, one foot after another, a slow, deliberate rhythm. Being a royal courier wasn't a job you just picked up on a whim like trying pottery or starting a yoga class. No, this role was serious business. It was an honor, one that came with blisters, sunburns, and the occasional scorpion encounter. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You glance down at your attire. Sandals made of woven reeds worn from miles of tread. A simple wool tunic light enough to breathe in the midday sun, but still warm when the desert chilled at night. Around your waist, a belt pouch with the essentials: dried fruit, a water skin, maybe a piece of charcoal for jotting something down if inspiration or panic strikes. That's how couriers dress: practical, unadorned, and always ready to move. They weren't flashy, they were fast. The Persian word for these messengers was piradazish, which loosely translates to the one who hurries. And yet here, you are not hurrying at all, because unlike them, you're not on the clock. Historians still argue whether these couriers were mostly professionals stationed at posts or if there were long-haul types who went the full distance. Some tablets suggest a sort of relay system, while others hint that particularly sensitive or secret messages might be entrusted to one reliable runner who made the entire trip alone. Brave, certainly. A little bit bonkers. Possibly. You pass a small rise in the land and spot the sun-baked remains of what was once a tiny way station, just a few stone outlines now. You crouch down, tracing the edge of a fire pit. Here, couriers would have stopped to rest, maybe rub sore feet, or recount tales of close calls with wild dogs or judgmental owls. Yes, owls. They were often considered omens, usually not the comforting kind. One courier, you imagine, sits cross-legged on the stone ledge. He's got a bandaged ankle and a pouch full of bruised grapes. He's muttering under his breath about how his cousin got the cushy Sardis route while he's stuck with the rocky bit. Still, he doesn't quit. He takes a bite of hardened barley bread, sips tepid water, and gets back up. That's the thing about this job. It wasn't just physical endurance, it was mental too. You had to memorize routes, recognize markers, and keep your wits sharp through days of solitary travel. Losing your scroll wasn't just a mistake, it was a scandal. Speaking of scrolls, you peer into your satchel and imagine what it'd be like carrying one. Papyrus or parchment rolled carefully and tied with a dyed cord, maybe sealed with clay, the imprint of a royal signet still warm when handed off. These weren't casual notes, they were orders, decrees, and sometimes personal letters from the king himself. No pressure. And then, of course, came the art of not ruining it. You couldn't let the scroll get wet or cracked or smeared. One courier is said to have carried a message across the Zagros Mountains in a hollowed-out cane wrapped in oilcloth. Ingenious? Yes. Comfortable? Probably not. To lighten the load, you shift your bag onto the other shoulder and take a swig from your imagined water skin. The coolness hits your tongue, and suddenly you're aware of just how little water there is in this environment. Couriers had to know where wells were or rely on local shepherds who might be friendly or might just offer vague gestures and no help whatsoever. You trudge past a field of wind-bleached shrubs. The air's dry but not unpleasant. It carries the faint scent of wild sage and sun-warmed stone. You squint at the horizon. No horses, no companions, just the occasional vulture giving you the side-eye from overhead. Don't take it personally, they just assume everyone out here is slightly lost. You pause to snack, imagining what the couriers ate. A pouch of mixed food items was essential dates. Figs, nuts, a bit of goat cheese wrapped in a fig leaf. But above all, the staple of the ancient Persian postal diet was something called doshab grape molasses. Thick, sweet, and syrupy, it was easy to carry and packed a surprising energy punch. One glob on a bit of flatbread and you were good for another 10 miles. Sort of. You smear your imaginary doshab across imaginary bread and take a bite. The taste is rich, tangy, and oddly comforting. Somewhere in the corner of your mind, you hear a courier mutter, "It's better with walnuts." Noted. As you walk on, your mind drifts to one final detail: bathroom breaks. Let's be honest, running across deserts and mountain passes with no real infrastructure means you become very aware of, shall we say, natural facilities. Couriers had to know where to stop, which bushes were forgiving, and when to just embrace the vast open sky. It's a humbling profession. Now the path turns slightly. You crest a low hill and see far in the distance the faint outline of another relay station. There's a soft flicker. Someone's lit a cooking fire. The air carries a hint of roasted onions and something faintly spiced. You're not even hungry, but your stomach makes a hopeful noise anyway. You move downhill, letting the gravity carry you a little faster. Your shoulders relax. The light is golden now, and you swear you hear faint laughter from the relay post, a story being told, a joke passed from one dusty soul to another. You walk into the sound, and just for a moment, you're not a modern listener tucked in bed with earbuds. You're one more link in the great chain of Persian communication, dust-covered, grape-fueled, and absolutely essential. You continue on, lulled by the warm quiet, your steps softer now as the land flattens. The breeze is picked up just slightly enough to whisper through the sparse grass and lift a bit of the sweat from your brow. You follow a gentle curve in the royal road, and something unusual catches your eye: no hoof prints. That's odd. You've passed several stretches like this already, and by now it's becoming clear horses aren't always the default. Despite the heroic imagery that tends to gallop into our heads when we think of ancient messengers, not all of Persia's couriers rode stallions with flared nostrils and perfectly trimmed manes. In fact, some of the best mail carriers in the empire moved on 2 legs instead of 4. You, friend, are walking in their exact footsteps. Literally. And the secret to their stamina: grapes. Not the goblet of wine kind, but the chew-it-as-you-go kind. Let's say you're a foot courier. You've been given a scroll, a route, and a gentle, definitely not optional deadline. You're not riding a horse because, well, horses are expensive, need feeding, and aren't great with cliffs or narrow goat paths. Also, you happen to be really, really good at long-distance running. What's your fuel: grapes? Not just raw, fresh from the vine grapes, though those are nice if you stumble upon them. No, you carry the preserved form raisins, grape paste, or if you're fancy, small balls of compacted grape and fig rolled with barley flour and a pinch of salt. Think ancient energy gummies, just less gummy. The Persians believed in the power of fruit, especially grapes. Vines grew easily in many corners of the empire, from the fertile hills near the Caspian Sea to the sunny regions of Anatolia. And because grapes could be dried, smashed, reduced, or turned into paste, they were perfect for travel. Small, packable, full of sugar and fiber, basically they were the granola bars of antiquity. One courier's satchel was once found with a strip of grape leather wrapped in goat skin. Imagine unrolling that in the middle of a desert stretch, tearing off a bite while wiping dust off your forehead. That same bite might give you the glucose boost to finish the next leg, especially since you'd likely be running another 15 miles before seeing another soul. Historians still argue whether this grape-based sustenance was officially provided or something couriers prepared themselves. Some scrolls suggest standardized rations. Others hint at a bring-your-own fruit policy. One satrap's records even mention grape paste being handed out in wax-sealed portions. Fancy, right? Now picture this. You're deep in the Zagros Mountains. Your sandals are worn, your legs are questioning your life choices, and it's your third day on this route. You pause under a rock ledge, fumble in your satchel, and pull out a small wrapped grape ball. You bite in. It's tart, rich, and slightly gritty with flour, but it hits the spot. For a moment, you feel almost immortal, or at least not collapsing. Of course, this wasn't a solo invention. Across the ancient world, runners and messengers had their own energizers. The Greeks chewed honey cakes, the Romans favored dried figs and cheese, but Persia trusted the grape. They even had a saying, loosely translated, "A scroll travels best on sugared legs." You pass a clump of wild vines creeping along a ruined wall. The grapes are shriveled, long forgotten, but you imagine them once picked, dried, packed, and carried across endless miles, silent companions in a courier's lonely journey. And about those horses, yes, they did exist. In fact, some routes were designed specifically for mounted messengers. The elite class of riders, often assigned to imperial edicts or urgent wartime correspondence, used swift horses stationed at the Angarium posts. These were carefully managed stations stocked with fresh horses and minimal bureaucracy, just enough to get you swapped, watered, and on your way. But even the best horse needs rest, food, and patience. And in certain regions, say steep terrain or swampy lowlands, horses were more of a liability than a help. Foot messengers had an edge. They were stealthier, more durable, and according to one Greek observer, less prone to accidental flinging into ravines. That's high praise. You cross a shallow stream now, stepping carefully from one worn stone to another. The water is cool, catching the late afternoon light. You pause, kneel, and splash a little on your face. For a courier, this moment might have been the highlight of the day, a brief connection to something clean and still. A lizard skitters past. You resist the urge to ask it for directions. Moving on, you notice something embedded in the roadside, an old horseshoe, rusted and half swallowed by time. Maybe it belonged to a relay rider who passed this way, or perhaps it was discarded after a shoeing accident. Either way, it's a relic of motion, one more piece of this enormous breathing network. Farther ahead, you hear something, the rhythmic slap of sandals on packed dirt. Another messenger, perhaps. You picture them running with focused breath, scroll tucked tightly, cheeks ruddy from sun and wind. Maybe they just ate the last of their grape supply and are already calculating how to stretch 2 figs over the next 6 hours. You give a small wave, but they don't see you, just like in a dream. The sun is slipping lower now, painting the sky with faint orange and pale lavender. Shadows stretch longer across the path, and the road feels quieter, softer. You walk slower too, not from fatigue, but from reverence. This was a road of urgency, yes, but also of patience. A message might need speed, but the messenger needs rhythm. And sometimes the best way to outrun a horse is to walk with a grape. The light is golden now, soft and sleepy, and your steps fall gently on the road. You've passed hills, streams, and ruins, but this stretch is quieter, almost sacred in its stillness. A perfect place to think about what's really happening inside the belly of a courier. Not metaphorically, literally. Because here's a strange little truth in ancient Persia: digestion wasn't just a private concern, it was a matter of state efficiency. You're still carrying that imaginary satchel of raisin cakes and grape paste, maybe even a crumpled pouch of barley meal laced with cumin. These weren't snacks, they were fuel. Reliable, portable, and most importantly, digestive-friendly. You've probably never thought of the Persian postal system as a testament to gastrointestinal endurance, but oh, it was. See, when you're running 20 miles a day, sometimes more, you can't afford an upset stomach. No pit stops, no late-night kebabs. You needed food that was compact, calorie-rich, and gentle on the gut, and that's where grapes truly shone. Grape sugar, or fructose, breaks down slower than honey or straight-up glucose, providing a more stable energy curve. This wasn't just pleasant, it was essential. A foot courier couldn't afford the sugar crash that might follow a honey binge. He needed long-burning fuel, something that kept his legs moving and his brain clear. And if it tasted decent, all the better. Now, the science behind this is, let's say, debated. Historians still argue whether the Persians consciously understood the metabolic benefits of grape-based diets, or if they just noticed that the runners who snacked on raisins didn't collapse quite as often as the ones who munched salted fish. But there's more. Grape paste, particularly when fermented slightly or boiled into thick syrups, also had mild antimicrobial properties. Not strong enough to cure anything serious, but enough to keep stomachs stable in a world where clean water wasn't always a given. Some fragments found in clay jars near the ancient city of Ecbatana suggest that runners had access to a paste made of grapes, carob, and vinegar, a mixture oddly similar to later Roman pasca, the soldiers' electrolyte drink of choice. Whether this was intentional chemistry or just happy coincidence, we may never know. But the runners kept running. You walk now with a kind of mindfulness, aware of each breath, each heartbeat. This is how a courier might have moved after hours on the road, pacing breath with steps, conserving energy, focused on maintaining an inner rhythm. No Fitbit, just instinct. And if you think about it, it's oddly beautiful. The mail system, this great artery of empire, was powered not by chariots or oil, but by people, fueled with dried fruit and sheer determination. Couriers learned their bodies like maps. They knew which food slowed them down. They knew how much water they could drink without sloshing. They even knew when to chew a bit of licorice root to keep their mouths moist through a stretch of dry wind. There's a papyrus fragment, one of those rare, almost mythical finds that mentions a courier who insisted on always starting his run with a palm of pressed grape and a prayer. You don't need to be a historian to respect that kind of routine. You pass by a bend in the road where a worn stone seat has been carved into the hillside. You pause, sit, and imagine rubbing sore calves just like 1,000 couriers before you. There's no crowd here, no audience, just the memory of movement. It's as if the stones themselves remember the rhythm of footsteps. And they might. At some point, someone probably did the math. How many grapes it took to fuel a single runner? How many runners it took to carry a royal edict across the entire empire? That's logistics. But what no scroll recorded, what no tally captured, was the quiet bravery of the courier alone on the road, trusting that a handful of raisins and the beat of his own legs would carry him safely to the next firelight. There's a whisper of wind now. You pull your cloak a little tighter, even though it's not cold yet. You're not rushing. You've earned a slow breath. A few facts float through your mind, gentle as dust motes. The royal road was over 500 miles long. The average message carried in relay could travel from Susa to Sardis in about 7 days, faster than many modern postal systems. And at its core, that miracle of speed was built not on horsepower, but on grape power. Of course, not every message made it on time. One legend tells of a courier who blamed his lateness on a landslide, a wild dog, and the sudden existential realization that his route passed too close to his ex's village. That last part was scratched out by a scribe, but you can still see the hesitation in the ink. Still, even with occasional mishaps, the Persian system was revered. When the Greeks finally got a proper look at it, many were astonished. "They beat us," one Athenian muttered by walking. You rise now, the stone seat warm beneath you. Your legs feel stronger somehow, like they remember something. You glance west where the sun has just begun to flirt with the horizon. The light turns amber. The road glows faintly as if remembering 1,000 sandaled feet marching into the dusk. One last step. You taste the memory of grape on your tongue, sweet, earthy, like a story still traveling. You follow the curve of the road as it gently descends into a wide plain. The light is soft now, almost bashful, and your steps leave faint impressions in the hard-packed earth. It's in this long stretch, flat, dry, and uninterrupted for miles, that the Persian postal relay truly thrived. Welcome to the land of Chapar Khanate, the heart of Darius's logistical wizardry. These were the stop-and-switch stations that made his mail system legendary. Think of them as ancient rest stops only. Instead of vending machines and questionable coffee, you had fresh horses, clean water, and a guy who probably judged you if your tunic was wrinkled. The Chapar Khanate system worked like this every 15 to 20 miles along the royal road. The state built simple, sturdy posts manned by station keepers. Couriers, whether on foot or horseback, would arrive, drop off their exhausted animal, or themselves pass the message to a fresh courier, and the delivery would continue without pause. You reach one such station now, or more precisely, its sun-worn bones. The foundation stones are still visible, forming a loose square, a central courtyard, rooms to the side. One corner still bears the charred remains of an old hearth. You step in careful not to disturb anything, and suddenly you're not alone. You're surrounded by echoes. You can almost hear it, the clatter of hooves, the hasty footsteps, the murmur of greetings exchanged between exhausted messengers. The thunk of a message cylinder hitting the table, the creak of leather saddlebags being replaced, and in the background, someone muttering about a rock stuck in their boot for 3 hours. One courier sits cross-legged bandaging a blister the size of a chickpea. Another throws back a cup of lukewarm goat's milk, probably regretting it. Someone else eats silently, staring at a clay tablet like it holds secrets more interesting than the king's decree. Spoiler, it doesn't. The setup was minimalist. A station keeper lived on site often with family or assistants tending to the stables and keeping scrolls moving. They were respected even if their job description included must enjoy hay and complaints. Historians still argue whether these relay posts had permanent residents or if local villagers rotated in and out as keepers. Some ruins suggest long-term habitation, storage rooms, grain silos, even family quarters. Others are more Spartan, hinting at temporary use or rapid rebuilds after invasions, floods, or the occasional grumpy elephant. You wander into the sleeping area, a small sunken room with traces of straw bedding. Imagine a courier collapsing here at dusk, scroll-delivered muscles, sore stomach full of whatever could be scrounged. A cracked jug of grape syrup sits nearby, half empty. You reach out, brushing your fingers against a groove worn into the wall, made perhaps by a century's worth of backs leaning in fatigue. One lesser-known tidbit, some of these posts were rumored to have encouragement scrolls, short notes left by previous couriers for the next rider. Mostly jokes, sometimes weather warnings, occasionally motivational grape-based poetry. You leave the sleeping room and return to the courtyard where a shallow trough once held water. You picture a horse drinking there, steam rising from its flanks. The sound of hooves still echoes faintly in your ears. You imagine them fresh, sharp, relentless, racing west to Sardis with the speed of empire. There's a story, half legend, half guesswork, about a courier who reached the next Chaperkane before the station keeper was ready. The startled man spilled his breakfast, shouted in surprise, and forgot to prepare the new horse. The courier reportedly waited exactly 60 seconds before continuing on foot, muttering, "I'll outrun the horse anyway." Bold move. You step outside the ruins now, the sky is wider, the wind a little stronger. You realize that this whole operation, this clockwork system of riders and stations, was the envy of the ancient world. The Greeks had roads, yes. The Romans later refined them, but it was the Persians who figured out how to stitch space together with people, food, and really precise relay math. You pass a half-buried bronze ring in the dirt, perhaps once used to tether horses. You brush it clean, then leave it as you found it, a silent token of travelers past. The light is starting to shift again, deepening into that magical twilight where everything becomes golden and slightly unreal. You imagine what it felt like to arrive here after a long run, to see smoke curling from the roof, to know that for just a few moments you could rest, eat, maybe share a joke with someone who'd also once outrun a thunderstorm. And then without fanfare, you'd hand over the message, a sealed scroll, a clay tablet, sometimes even a carved piece of wood with instructions etched in Aramaic or Old Persian. No small talk, no questions. The next courier grabs it, nods, and disappears into the fading light. Just like that, the empire keeps moving. You take one last look at the ruins. They're empty now, but not dead. The stones remember. The wind that wraps around your ankles still knows the names of couriers. You walk on your own pace, steady, matching the memory of those who came before. And somewhere ahead, another station waits. You've walked for miles now, and the silence has become familiar, comforting even. The road stretches on beneath your feet with the occasional echo of a bird call overhead or the dry rattle of a beetle scurrying across the path. You're not lost. You're simply between things. And tonight, your cargo is a message. Let's imagine it, a single scroll carefully rolled, tucked into a bone or leather tube, sealed with wax, imprinted by a ring worn only by those who matter. The words inside confidential, meant for a satrap, a general maybe, even a foreign envoy waiting in a shadowy chamber, lit by oil lamps and thick with the scent of cedar. This particular scroll began its journey in Persepolis, the glittering city of Darius. Built in stone and pride, the city was the ceremonial heart of the empire, a place of terraces, columns, and corridors where decisions rippled outward like sound waves in a canyon. From there, the message was entrusted to the postal system, a network of people stations and sore calves. The scroll's destination, Sardis, a vibrant, slightly showy western city that served as the capital of Lydia, one of the empire's many satrapies. Sardis was wealthy, dramatic, and fond of marble. It liked to be seen. And if Persepolis was the brain, Sardis was the gloved hand waving to the Mediterranean world. Your scroll's journey begins with a runner. Let's call him Tyran. He receives the message before dawn, the ink still drying. His supervisor hands him a small bundle of rations, gives a nod, and just like that, Tyran is off. He runs silently past the awakening city gates, past sleepy guards and blinking goats with nothing but a satchel and a sense of importance. As you walk, you trace his steps. The first stretch is smooth, wide road, good light. Tyran hums a tune under his breath, chewing on a piece of grape leather, the kind mixed with crushed almonds. The sun climbs, and so does the heat, but Tyran has done this route before. He knows where to find shade, how to step to avoid fatigue, and most importantly, when to change sandals. Yes, ancient couriers had multiple pairs. You can't rule an empire with blisters. You reach a bend in the path where the stones feel warmer. Tyran likely passed through here mid-morning. He probably stopped at a roadside vendor, an old woman with a donkey and a pile of walnuts. Maybe he traded a piece of his grape paste for a handful of dried apricots. Postal salary didn't go far, but fruit bartering, that was universal. The landscape shifts slightly. A grove of tamarisk trees offers brief shade, and you feel the relief even now. Tyran would have welcomed it, even just to adjust his belt and breathe without dust in his mouth. He might have checked the seal on his scroll, still intact, still glinting with the king's emblem. Good. No room for error. Historians still argue whether couriers were allowed to read the messages they carried. Most say no, security was tight and tampering could mean exile or worse. But there's always the theory of trusted interpreters, couriers trained to memorize content in case of emergencies. If Tyran was one of them, he never showed it. His face betrayed nothing. Not even when the message was urgent. And this one was. You arrive at the next relay station just as the stars begin to emerge in the cooling sky. Tyran would have arrived by midday. There he passed the scroll to the next runner, Nabok, a wiry man with excellent posture and a tendency to whistle when nervous. Nabok took the message. Didn't read it, didn't ask questions, just tied his sandals tighter, muttered something about sand fleas and vanished westward. His path would take him through rocky terrain where wild goats outnumbered people and the only inn served barley soup with alarming regularity. You continue in his footsteps. The road narrows briefly before widening again, and you spot faint tracks in the dirt, imaginary or otherwise. You imagine Nabok running here, scanning the horizon, knowing that one mistake, a twisted ankle, a missed turn, could cost days. The scroll must reach Sardis. That was the order. Along the way, messengers passed the scroll like a torch. Each one knew nothing except the direction and the weight of the mission. Some rode, some ran. One even limped the final stretch after a scorpion sting. But they made it, because that was the system. No matter what the message moved forward. By the time it arrived in Sardis, the scroll had passed through over 100 hands. It was received in a marble hall by a satrap with polished sandals and an expression that said, "I'd better not be summoned to Persepolis again." He broke the seal with a knife carved from ivory and read it slowly, his eyes narrowing at the mention of troop movements and diplomatic guests arriving too early. The courier who brought it, let's call him Ardashir, stood silently. He didn't ask what the message said. He didn't even drink the wine offered to him. He just bowed, turned, and began the journey back. His job was done. You sit now at a smooth rock near a small dry creek, imagining the scroll's path etched into the dust. From palace to port, through hunger, wind, sore muscles, and laughing shepherds. One message, one empire, 1,000 tiny footsteps. You close your eyes for a moment, the stars are bright now, and the road stretches endlessly forward. Maybe you'll carry the next scroll, or maybe you already are. The stars blink lazily overhead as you continue west, the royal road glowing faintly beneath a wash of starlight. The landscape is flat again, calm in its emptiness. A fox darts across the path up ahead, stops, stares at you for a moment, and disappears without a sound. You're alone, which is just how Persian couriers preferred it. Because sometimes the messages they carried weren't just dull taxation updates or invitations to another royal cousin's tedious wedding. Sometimes they were secrets. Tonight we walk with one of those secrets. Let's say a scroll is prepared in Persepolis not by a scribe in full daylight, but by a royal agent cloaked in discretion, maybe writing with a reed pen under oil lamp glow. It's wrapped not in the usual polished cylinder, but in a hidden pouch fastened inside the courier's tunic, close to the skin. No seal, no flashy symbols, just quiet parchment carrying very loud words. This one, it's about a spy, or several, operating out of a small port town near the edge of the empire, sending coded information to enemies across the sea. There's a list of names, suspicions, a plan. It must arrive in Sardis by the 7th day. No delays, no hands except the satraps, no mistakes. The courier selected for this job isn't chosen for his speed, he's chosen for his memory. Historians still argue whether Persian couriers were regularly trained in espionage or if that was a role kept strictly to royal agents. But some evidence, an inscription here, a scribbled note there, suggests that a few runners did both. Messengers who didn't just carry information, they became it. You keep walking thinking about that weight. The pressure of knowing what you carry, but also knowing you must show no sign. You imagine the courier's face blank, steady, unreadable. He eats dates in silence. He sips water as if it's any other day. But inside, his heart is pacing. Because if he's caught, if someone guesses if he takes a wrong turn or stops for too long, he vanishes. The road ahead leads into a sparse grove of cypress trees swaying gently their tops, whispering secrets to the wind. A perfect place for an ambush if someone were watching, but no one is. Not tonight. You pass through safely, though a bird startles from the brush with a shriek that briefly sends your heartbeat north. There were those who tried to intercept Persian messages. The royal road, for all its splendor, was still exposed. Bandits' new couriers carried more than just scrolls. They carried influence orders, sometimes maps. Some even believed the leather tubes themselves were worth stealing, decorated, sturdy, handmade. A courier could be jumped for the bag alone. That's why secrecy wasn't just a matter of hiding the message. Sometimes it meant hiding the courier's intent entirely. There's a tale possibly exaggerated of a courier who, suspecting he was being watched, buried his message in a goatskin pouch near a river and spent the night pretending to fish. The next morning, he retrieved it and continued on, having fooled his would-be attackers with nothing more than a rod and an impressively convincing yawn. You pass a large, flat stone cracked in the middle. It said that certain waypoints had carved symbols coded not in language but in scratches and markings understood only by specific messengers. Turn left here. Avoid that well. Trust no one after dusk. You kneel and trace one such faint mark, now a triangle within a crescent. Its meaning lost to time or maybe still alive in some dusty archive waiting to be decoded. You smile to yourself. Even in sleep, this empire has layers. You rise again and think about the scroll still traveling with you in your mind. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just a routine update about grain production and local rainfall. Or maybe it's about war. Maybe it's about betrayal. But the courier will never ask. He walks like you walk now, calm, deliberate. Every muscle memorizes the path. Every tree is a marker, every sound is cataloged, and when he finally arrives at Sardis, he doesn't wait for applause. He hands off the message to a royal clerk, says nothing, and disappears into the side streets like a shadow into shade. Later in the Great Hall, the satrap breaks the seal and reads with furrowed brows. He nods to no one in particular, calls for his guards, and gives orders that echo down marble corridors. Within hours, 3 men are arrested. One ship is seized, and a port city on the edge of the empire breathes a little easier. All because a man walked across half the known world with a hidden scroll tucked beneath his tunic. You pause now, leaning on your walking stick, or maybe it's just a sturdy tree root, and look up. The stars are thick tonight. No city lights, no noise, just you and the distant rustle of grass. The secret scroll is gone, delivered, but the road remembers. Somewhere ahead, the next message waits. The stars begin to fade as dawn stretches her sleepy fingers across the horizon. A soft pink blush rises in the east, chasing away the shadows that clung to the folds of your tunic. The road is quieter now, even by ancient standards. No travelers in sight, just the gentle thump of your feet against hard, packed dirt. You've entered a strange part of the journey when time feels like it unspools slowly, one lazy loop at a time. You imagine being a courier now, nearing the midpoint of your route. Muscles warm, mind focused, and stomach starting to wonder if there's a relay station with warm bread ahead. You hum under your breath just to fill the silence. But today's message, it's running late. Yes, even the Persian postal system, designed with imperial pride, royal oversight, and a truly impressive volume of grapes, occasionally ran into snags. Lost scrolls, injured couriers, weather that refused to cooperate. Or sometimes just goats. There's a story passed down through scribes and station keepers of a message that arrived in Sardis 2 days late. The reason one courier's horse got spooked by a flock of geese reared, slipped, and fell directly into a shallow irrigation canal. The courier, soaked and annoyed, climbed out only to discover that the scroll had floated gently downstream. It was later recovered by a confused fisherman who had to be bribed with 6 figs and a pair of sandals not to read it aloud. Was it true? Historians still argue whether it was a parable meant to stress message handling care, or if it really happened. But the broader truth remains, even the greatest systems have weak points, and the Persian postal service, for all its glory, was no different. You pass through a low valley now flanked by wind-smoothed rock and tufts of dry grass. Here delays weren't uncommon. Sandstorms in the east could bury waystations. Flooded rivers in the north could force reroutes. Once a minor landslide buried 3 horses, 2 couriers, and an entire shipment of walnut paste meant for a royal feast. It was, according to the scrolls, a day of great inconvenience and hunger. Yet, what's remarkable isn't that things went wrong, it's how rarely they did. Out of thousands of miles, hundreds of stations, and countless messages, the system mostly worked. And that wasn't luck, it was design. You step onto a raised stone causeway, a part of the road engineered to stay above floodwaters. The Persians, clever and annoyingly thorough, anticipated everything. In fact, it's believed that Darius had a special committee of engineers whose sole job was to overthink terrain. They built drainage ditches, designed shaded waypoints, and even placed shrines to appease local spirits. Because when you're trying to run an empire by mail, you need both planning and divine favor. But sometimes a scroll still went missing. One set of recovered clay tablets near Susa details a crisis where an urgent military dispatch never arrived. The courier was found weeks later, alive, uninjured, and extremely confused. He had apparently misunderstood a road marker and traveled to the wrong Sardis. A smaller town with the same name? You can imagine the shouting. The fallout mild. The courier was reassigned to routes where the towns only had one name, and the road marker in question was replaced with a more blatantly obvious one, reportedly featuring an arrow and a tiny carved frown. Still, even with mishaps, the Persian mail system's reputation held strong. In fact, many later empires, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, borrowed from it. Some even copied it outright. The idea of relay stations, standardized routes, and state-supported communication didn't vanish when Persia fell. It spread, slowly like ink across parchment. You walk a bit slower now, listening to the wind as it combs through dry reeds. You wonder what it must have felt like to be a station keeper awaiting a delayed message. Did they worry panic scribble dramatic letters to the central administration? More likely, they just made tea and waited. A late message was inconvenient, but not always catastrophic. Unless, of course, it was a royal birthday message. One poor courier, according to legend, arrived at the palace gates with a scroll meant for Queen Atassa's celebration 2 days late. The party was over, the musicians gone, and the last of the roasted quail had been fed to the palace cats. The queen read the scroll, sighed, and reportedly said, "Well, at least he's still breathing." A close call. You chuckle softly. The empire may have been vast, but its couriers were still humans susceptible to mistakes, distraction, or the occasional detour caused by unusually aggressive herons. You crest a gentle rise and pause. Below in the valley sits another way station, this one restored, preserved by a nearby village that still uses the surrounding stones for their own paths. Children play where couriers once collapsed from exhaustion. A fig tree grows beside the old stables, and there's even a faint carving on the wall of a smiling man holding... Is that a grape? You descend toward it, step steady. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and something sweet, maybe dates roasting in a nearby hearth. You imagine arriving here late, apologizing to the station keeper who shrugs and offers you water anyway. No judgment, just shared understanding. After all, even the best runners trip sometimes. You sit beneath the fig tree now, letting your legs rest, your mind drift. The Persian road continues ahead, long, unwavering, patient. It doesn't care if you're fast, it only asks that you continue. And so you will. Morning has fully arrived now. The sky is washed in pale blue, and the chill of night has melted into a pleasant warmth that clings to your shoulders like a friendly shawl. The road beneath your feet is sunlit and golden, and though it stretches endlessly forward, your steps feel lighter. Maybe it's the rhythm you found. Or maybe it's the quiet thrill of knowing that, like the couriers before you, you're fueled by nothing more than fruit willpower and a healthy respect for ancient administrative efficiency. But let's not get too romantic. You're still walking across the Persian Empire, and there's sand in your shoes. This stretch of road takes you past craggy hills and low brush, the kind of landscape that keeps secrets in its shadows. It's here amid the silence that the daily grind of courier life unfolds in all its gritty grape-pace glory. Because while the road was meticulously planned, the journey was anything but predictable. Let's talk snacks. Persian couriers carried more than just messages, they carried an entire mini pantry. Not because they were particularly indulgent, but because there simply weren't restaurants dotting the royal road. No kebab carts, no date milk stalls with ambient sitar music, just the wind, the dust, and whatever they'd packed in their worn leather pouches. The staples. Flat bread, of course. Thin, durable, often dry enough to double as a makeshift fan or improvised scroll wrapper. Cheese, mostly goat, occasionally hard enough to chip a tooth. Dried fruits, raisins, figs, apricots. And always, always grape paste. You pause to imagine the taste. Sticky, tangy, sun-thickened grape reduced into a chewy slab, sometimes sprinkled with sesame or dusted with flour. One bite and you'd feel just energized enough to trudge another mile. Maybe 2 if there was shade ahead. Some couriers carried sekingab in a vinegar and honey syrup, mixed with water used both to quench thirst and as a primitive electrolyte drink. It's refreshing if you ignore the fact that it tastes a little like salad dressing. But it worked. The body needs salt, sugar, and hydration, especially when you're crossing terrain that alternates between pleasant meadow and oven on medium heat. And it wasn't just food that helped couriers endure, it was ritual. One courier's diary fragment etched onto a tablet and discovered near the eastern edge of the empire details his routine rise before sunrise. Chew a few raisins, stretch by the roadside, and whisper a short prayer to Anahita, goddess of water and travelers. Only then would he begin his run. And at midday, another prayer. Not for strength, but for clear skies. Rain, after all, turned the royal road into a slippery mess. Historians still argue whether these rituals were personal quirks or shared practice. Some believe couriers had unofficial codes, nods, hand gestures, even small songs they'd hum to signal safe passage or mark distances. One Greek traveler wrote, possibly with a hint of envy, They sing to the road as if it knows them. You smile. The road does know you now. Of course, not all the daily grind was charming. Couriers faced the occasional sandstorm, blinding, gritty, loud enough to make your ears ring for days. They encountered territorial dogs, curious children, overly chatty farmers with strong opinions about sheep breeding, and then there were the bandits. Ah, the bandits. A courier's least favorite roadside attraction. You pass a narrow gorge, now the kind of place perfect for ambushes and equally perfect for paranoid overthinking. Couriers often carried short knives not for combat but for cutting scroll seals, slicing dried meat, or when necessary defending themselves. There's a famous incident recorded on a badly cracked tablet involving a courier named Varaz, who was stopped by two would-be robbers demanding his satchel. Instead of fighting, he offered them a scroll. "It's just taxes," he said. "Read it. If you like it, you can keep it." The bandits, unsure what to do, read aloud for a bit, grew bored, and let him pass. Whether it's true or not, the story stuck, and Varaz became a legend, not for speed, but for the weaponization of boredom. As you continue, the land opens into a wide stretch of grassland. You see sheep in the distance, their bells tinkling faintly. A shepherd raises a hand in greeting, his cloak wrapped against the breeze. You nod back. Even now, this road is used. Not for scrolls, perhaps, but for stories, for movement, for memory. There's another roadside station ahead, this one marked by a low wall and a small well. You sit for a moment, grateful for the break. The well water is cool, tinged with minerals. You imagine a courier filling a goatskin bag here, then dipping a crust of flatbread into the water to soften it. You try the same in your mind. It tastes chewy, but edible. Nearby, a pile of old stones bears scratch marks, tally lines perhaps. One courier counting the days, or maybe marking how many times he'd passed through. A quiet reminder that even in routine there was purpose. Because in the end, this wasn't just about delivery, it was about dedication. These couriers didn't work for fame or fortune. They worked because the message mattered. Whether it was news of war, grain taxes, royal births, or requests for more figs at the Western banquet hall, those messages held empires together. And all it took was a few snacks, a pair of decent sandals, and a sense of direction. You rise again, shoulders relaxed, belly imagining dried cheese and sweet raisins. The sun is overhead now, casting short shadows. You walk in their company, the ghosts of those who ran before you, sandaled and grape-stained, humming their road songs and counting the miles by meals. Forward, always forward, one snack at a time. The road hums beneath your feet, warm with midday sun. You wipe a thin line of sweat from your brow as your shadow shortens, tucked tight beneath you like a sleeping cat. The landscape rolls out endlessly, dust and scrub with occasional tufts of dry grass clinging to cracked earth. It's easy to forget you're moving through history until you remember that everything around you was once part of a system more precise than a sundial at noon. Because here, far from palaces and scrolls, the Persian couriers had one thing above all rules. The Piradazish, those elite couriers of the empire, didn't just carry messages. They embodied reliability. Their role was sacred. They were the bloodstream of the empire, pumping orders and secrets from the heart to the limbs and back again. So naturally, they had a code, an unspoken agreement, a standard of discipline that made the difference between empire and anarchy. What were the rules? You ask amused. Well, let's see. Rule 1. Don't ask questions about what you carry. That scroll sealed with the royal signet, not yours to open, not yours to guess. Doesn't matter if it's squishy, ominously heavy, or smells suspiciously like pickled garlic. If it's sealed, you deliver. If it's unsealed, you still don't read it. Even if it says, "To the most glorious and fearsome satrap of Lydia," in what appears to be glittery ink. Rule 2, always follow the road. Shortcuts might seem tempting, a goat path here, a creek bed there, but straying from the royal road was frowned upon. Not because of superstition, though there was plenty of that, but because the road was mapped, measured, guarded, and occasionally sprinkled with helpful amenities like water jars or bored station keepers offering unsolicited dating advice. Historians still argue whether straying from the road was punishable or merely discouraged. Some say that deviation led to fines. Others believe it led to something worse, being reassigned to the damp routes. You know, the ones where everything smells faintly of mildew and all the way stations are haunted by goats. Rule 3. Keep moving. This one was the golden law. No loitering, no naps in the sun, no long chats with passing shepherds, and certainly no detours to see that very interesting hill temple just a mile off the road. Couriers were expected to pause only for food water relay handoffs, or if desperate, a brief moment of yelling at their own feet for refusing to cooperate. But of course, they did stop sometimes. You reach one of those stopping points, now a small hollow off the side of the road shaded by a pair of windswept trees. The ground is smooth as if polished by centuries of resting bodies. There's an old inscription carved into one of the rocks, a crude figure arms outstretched with a satchel slung across its chest. A courier's signature. You sit here like they did. The sun shifts behind a wisp of cloud, casting the world in soft focus. Insects buzz lazily, and a small bird perches nearby, eyeing your imaginary grapes with bold curiosity. You think of the couriers not just as runners, but as people. One station keeper's journal discovered in a clay pot sealed with wax and incredibly bad handwriting records a courier named Rostam, who always wore a red sash. Not for vanity, but because he claimed it kept the scrolls lucky. Superstition maybe, but his messages were never late. Another account tells of a female courier, rare but not impossible, named Yazia. She was fast, quiet, and according to the satrap of Aria, alarmingly good at memorizing conversations she wasn't invited to overhear. Her route became the standard for training new recruits, most of whom could never quite match her time. The code of the courier wasn't just rules, it was identity. You walk again, the terrain flattening. Far ahead, you see the shimmer of heat rising like a mirage. The next station is still distant, but in your mind, you feel the pulse of duty. That strange, patient energy couriers must have known and understanding that what they did mattered even if they'd never see the results. There's a well-known phrase carved at the entrance of one ruined relay post: a man who knows the road serves more than the king. It's poetic, if a little vague. Historians debate its meaning. Was it about loyalty, humility, or just someone trying to impress the next shift with their calligraphy skills? Either way, it rings true. Because while the Persian Empire thrived on palaces, generals, and gold, it was built on the backs of sandaled men and women who simply kept walking, through heat, through wind, through rules that never loosened. And speaking of rules, there was one last unofficial one: respect the message, even if it was mundane, even if it was petty, even if it was the fourth scroll that week complaining about sheep wandering into military drills. The message mattered, and the courier respected it. You pass a marker stone, now worn smooth, but still bearing the faint outline of a stylized eye. A symbol perhaps reminding couriers that someone was always watching. Or maybe that the message itself had its own awareness. You can never be sure. The wind picks up, brushing your cheeks with the scent of distant mint and sun-baked dust. You tighten your cloak. The next stretch will be long. But the code is clear, so you walk on. Quiet, steady, trusted. One step at a time. The sun begins to slant downward, just slightly, casting longer shadows across the road. You feel it in your shoulders first, a faint reminder that even the best traveled routes are still work. The breeze is dry and carries the scent of baked soil and distant olive trees. Somewhere behind you, a stone shifts lazily as if stretching after a long nap. You're thinking now about the scroll again. Not its contents this time, but the vessel, the thing that carries the message as safely as you carry yourself. Because out here, it wasn't just about moving fast, it was about moving securely. Let's talk scroll logistics. In the Persian Empire, scrolls were typically written on papyrus, parchment, or in some cases, very thin leather. Some were etched onto wooden tablets coated with wax that could be smoothed and reused. For extremely important orders, clay tablets were still used, compact, nearly indestructible, and heavier than a bag of wet grapes. regardless of the format, protection was key. Messages were usually placed in cylindrical cases, often of leather, sometimes of carved bone or even hollow reeds. The cylinder was tied with string and sealed with wax or clay, stamped by a signet ring unique to the sender. If that seal was broken early, well, someone would have a very stern conversation with someone else, possibly while holding a scroll with suspicious smudges. You reach a small clearing and sit on a sun-warmed rock. In your hand, imaginary, of course, you hold one of these message cylinders. It's worn, the leather soft from years of use, but the closure is still firm. You run your thumb over the dried wax seal. It has the faint shape of a lion in profile. Royal business. The Persian word for this was daipi, a term used to refer to written documents, whether inscribed on clay or inked on hide. To protect the dippy, it had to be tucked away, not just in a satchel, but in a part of the courier's gear that couldn't be easily grabbed. Some wore message tubes under their tunics, others tied them to their belts, hidden beneath extra cloth. A few truly paranoid couriers carried dummy scrolls up front just in case someone got grabby. But the most fascinating bit, some messengers memorized the contents of the message just in case the physical version was lost. This wasn't common and it wasn't easy. It required training, precision, and a memory so sharp you could recite troop movements, grain records, or an entire poem without blinking. Historians still argue whether this practice was routine or reserved for emergency situations. A few clay inscriptions hint at oral redundancy, the use of verbal backup for key communications. Whether this was state policy or just the habit of particularly obsessive messengers is unclear. And sometimes the message was altered en route. Imagine a station keeper feeling clever or bold, opens a scroll, reads it, and decides to edit. Maybe they don't like what it says. Maybe they want to curry favor with the receiver. Maybe they just have very strong feelings about punctuation. Either way, by the time the message arrives, it's been slightly massaged. One case preserved on a tablet fragment describes a dispute between two satraps. The sender claimed to have ordered a shipment of supplies. The receiver claimed he'd been insulted publicly. Investigations revealed the message had been tampered with halfway through its journey, and the middle courier mysteriously disappeared. No one asked too many questions after that. You walk again, the late afternoon light warming the backs of your hands. You pass a series of flat stones arranged in a spiral, likely decorative, maybe even symbolic. One has a groove where a cylinder could have rested. Perhaps this was a drop point used when two couriers didn't cross paths directly. The receiver would retrieve the scroll and mark the stone to show it had been collected. A silent handshake between ghosts. You imagine what it was like to hand off a scroll. The ritual of it, a nod, a check of the seal, a sip of shared water. And then off again before the message could lose momentum. There were even protocols for emergency delivery scrolls wrapped in waxed cloth, carried at night by torchlight, or tied to the belly of a horse for speed. These weren't everyday messages. These were urgent move the army level urgent. And couriers were expected to break speed records without breaking the seal. You glance down at your tunic, no wax stains, no ink smears, just the comforting illusion of smooth travel. Still, you wonder what it must have felt like to carry something that could change a province's fate. Or to know that a single word misplaced might start a feud lasting generations. You pass a pile of sun-bleached pottery shards. One bears the remnants of a message, just a few characters, perhaps a date, a location. The rest is lost to time, but you smile, because even fragments speak. Even broken letters still whisper something. You walk on the wind, teasing your tunic like a curtain on a sleepy afternoon. You hum a little tune, something made up. A song that might have been sung by a courier long ago, carrying a scroll tucked under his arm, eyes sharp, stomach rumbling, heart quiet. And ahead, always ahead, another message waits to be carried. The afternoon wears on, stretching its golden fingers across the scrub and stone. Your feet fall into a natural rhythm again, one shared by generations of couriers. Before you, steady, grounded, just enough momentum to make progress without exhausting the lungs. The road winds gently now, more suggestion than command, and you follow its dusty spine westward as shadows begin to grow. Somewhere ahead, a village is preparing for dusk. Smoke curls from cook fires. A shepherd whistles to his goats. But you're not headed there. Not yet. You're thinking about something bigger. How did this system, this sprawling, dust-covered miracle, leave such an imprint on the world? Because while the Persian postal network was efficient, practical, and in some cases surprisingly tasty grape paste, again, naturally, it was also visionary. It shaped how empires, not just Persia, thought about time communication and control. You crest a gentle hill, the sky wide above you, and imagine yourself not as a single courier, but as a thread in a vast loom. The empire needed that loom, needed its parts to stay connected, synchronized, loyal. And while roads had always existed, Darius's version was something new, a way to make geography irrelevant. Messages that once took weeks could now arrive in days. Decisions could be implemented before problems fully bloomed. A rebellion in the north. You could send word, send soldiers, and send lunch orders all before the fires reached the second village. This wasn't just fast, it was strategic. The Greeks noticed. Oh, did they notice? Herodotus praised the Persian system with the now famous line about snow rain and gloom of night. It wasn't a compliment thrown lightly. To Greek thinkers, Persia was the enemy, but also a marvel of administrative genius. Later, when the Romans rose to power, they borrowed heavily from this model. Their cursus publicus, or state postal system, used similar relay stations, official messengers, and road markers. Even some of their first road names were, let's be honest, shamelessly Persian in design. Flattery through imitation, as the saying goes. You pause at a smooth stone just off the path. It's marked with a faint carving, perhaps a map. It's hard to tell. Some think these were early navigation aids. Others believe they were simply decorative. Historians still argue whether ancient couriers used written maps or memorized every turn and landmark. Most likely it was both. A backup plan carved into stone just in case your brain forgot the difference between left at the fig tree and left after the fig tree, but before the suspiciously large lizard-shaped rock. What's undeniable is this: the Persian system worked. It outlasted wars, plagues, and more than a few monarchs who forgot their couriers' names but not their value. Even when parts of the empire began to crumble, the mail kept moving. One set of scrolls found in the ruins of Sardis records messages continuing to arrive weeks after the region had fallen to invading forces. The postal network didn't stop, it adapted. Local station keepers continued working. Couriers kept running. Messages were still passed even when thrones changed hands. It was almost stubborn. And that legacy persisted. You walk now beside a narrow ditch probably once used for water runoff beside the road. It's dry now, lined with tufts of grass and the occasional shard of clay. But if you close your eyes, you can almost hear the sound of sandals splashing through after a summer rain. Maybe a courier shouting over the storm, clutching his scroll tighter, knowing it had to arrive. Fast forward a few centuries, in the early Islamic empires, Persian roots and methods were preserved. The buried system adopted relay principles nearly identical to those of the Achaemenids. In some cases, they even reused the same roads, repaired the same stations. The Mongols did the same. Their Yam postal relay system stretched across Asia, inspired in part by Persian infrastructure. Couriers rode with leather pouches, sealed scrolls, and official passes that allowed them to commandeer horses and demand lodging. Sound familiar? Even in Europe, whispers of the Persian system surfaced. Marco Polo, wandering centuries later, described similar courier chains across Asia. Whether he knew it or not, he was walking in Persian footprints. And now so are you. You stop for a moment, the wind is soft again. Somewhere nearby, a bee hums lazily, then veers off in search of something sweeter than dust. The road bends ahead, leading toward a patch of green, maybe a fig grove, maybe just a trick of the light. You think about the empire not as a place of gold and power, but of rhythm. Scrolls, grapes, sandals, seals, over and over, mile after mile. It wasn't the drama that held Persia together. It was the routine. There's a quiet kind of nobility in that. Not glory, not fame, just the knowledge that someone had to carry the message. And someone did. Maybe it was Rostam with his lucky red sash. Maybe it was Yazia memorizing her route in total silence. Maybe it was 100 nameless runners whose only reward was a bowl of soup and a half-decent place to sleep. Doesn't matter. The empire knew their worth. And so the message kept moving, like a heartbeat across the land. You take a breath, deep, grounding, and then you step forward just one more footfall in the long, long rhythm of Persian time. The road feels softer beneath your feet now, as if it's absorbed centuries of footsteps and settled into something more forgiving, more gentle. The land has flattened the hills, smoothed out behind you, and ahead, the path stretches wide and welcoming, scattered with golden leaves and faint traces of cart wheels, long gone. You walk in silence, but the silence is full. Not long ago, this very stretch may have echoed with life. Not bustling, not loud, but purposeful. A courier passing through here would have been alone. Yes, but never unseen. The road watched. The earth remembered. This was a part of the royal road where speed turned to memory. Long after the Persian Empire fell, this route remained, not as a functioning mail path, but as a kind of ghost road, a line on the land where kings had once spoken across great distances and where now only wind and echoes traveled. You pause beside the remains of what might have been a way station. The walls are low crumbling, covered in moss. A fig tree has split one corner stone, its roots curling around clay shards and old roof tiles. There's a faint trail of ash in the center where perhaps someone built a fire not too long ago. Travelers still pass here, not couriers, not anymore, but perhaps a shepherd seeking shade, or a farmer resting beside his mule, or even a modern hiker wondering why the road seems so deliberate. You sit on a sun-warmed stone and look around. The walls don't talk, but you can feel the story in the space. The way the wind curves differently inside the old post. The smoothness of a stone step that's been worn down not by rain, but by sandals. So many sandals. And here's where the magic of it all begins to settle in. Messages stopped moving, the empire faded, but the idea remained. A straight road, a message in motion. One person trusting another to carry words forward unseen but unbroken. Historians still argue whether these roads were used after Persia's fall by civilians, merchants, or local rulers. Some claim they were abandoned, quickly eroded by time and neglect. Others believe they lingered, repurposed, reshaped, merged with newer paths like old rivers folding into new deltas. In parts of Anatolia, villagers told stories of the Talking Road, a name given to a stretch of the royal road that supposedly carried dreams. One tale describes a woman walking it alone with a letter to a ghost husband. Another speaks of a child who followed the road to find a lost cousin and instead met a traveling poet who taught her how to speak in verse. Are these true? Probably not. But the fact that the road inspired stories long after it ceased function tells you something deeper. A great empire sends orders by scroll, but a great culture sends stories. You get up again, brushing imaginary dust from your knees, you walk on. The road is quieter now. No goats, no birds, just the occasional click of a pebble under your sandal. You pass a row of upright stones, spaced evenly, markers of some kind. Maybe old property lines or spiritual totems. Maybe just guideposts for couriers, long gone, a kind of ancient breadcrumb trail. You wonder about the last courier who ever ran this path with an official message. Did he know he'd be the last? Did he sense the empire around him fraying? Or did he just keep running? Scroll tucked in, confident that the next station would be ready. The seal would be unbroken and the kingdom would keep breathing. Empires don't fall all at once. They dissolve quietly like sugar in warm tea. And yet even after the palaces turned to ruins, even after the signet rings were buried with kings, no one remembered the courier's path remained. It didn't need orders to justify its lines. It had become something else entirely, a trail of connection. You pass a carved stone half sunken in dirt. Faintly beneath lichen, you see the grooves of what might have been a satrap's symbol. A bird with its wings folded. Underneath, in old Persian script, he who brings the word is the thread of kings. You touch the carving lightly and move on. There's a warmth in your chest now, not from the sun, but from the realization that even when purpose fades, motion lingers. The act of moving forward, carrying something, even just a story, is what keeps the world tied together. Ahead, the road dips slightly, then vanishes into trees. You follow without hesitation. The sun is lower now, shadows longer. The path is darker under the canopy, and you hear the soft rustle of leaves like whispers in another language. You feel it in your legs, the weariness of distance. But it's a peaceful weariness, not the kind that demands you stop, but the kind that tells you you've done something worth doing. And maybe, just maybe, that's all the couriers ever wanted. The trees thin out gradually, and the road becomes a ribbon of dappled gold and shadow beneath your feet. The light is soft, now stretched wide by the approaching dusk. Each step feels quieter, as if even the earth is holding its breath for the last leg of the journey. This is the part of the road where stories give way to stillness. You're nearing the end, not of the road itself, which continues on in one form or another, but of the ancient empire's long relay of footsteps, messages, and dusty scrolls. And fittingly, the final lesson isn't about speed or glory or even grape paste. It's about something simpler: why people kept doing this. Why carry messages across deserts? Why build stations every 15 miles? Why memorize routes brave dogs endure, sore knees, and whisper morning prayers to the sky? It wasn't just about logistics, it was about trust. A courier didn't need to know the full plan, he just needed to believe that his portion mattered. That what he carried, what he endured, what he remembered would reach someone somewhere and become part of something larger. And at the very end of the royal road, when that final courier reached Sardis or Susa or wherever the message was bound, he didn't get a parade. Maybe a nod, maybe a bowl of stew. Then he was sent back again because the next message already waited. That's legacy. And speaking of waiting here, we are back at the grapes. This whole journey started with the strange, almost absurd image of a Persian courier beating horses with grapes. But as you've seen, it wasn't about violence or literal beatings. It was about outpacing foot couriers on grape-based fuel, sometimes faster, sometimes more reliable than horses. Yes, mounted messengers had their place. They were crucial in emergencies, ideal for speed bursts. But the foot couriers, with their grape-paced rations and relentless rhythm, often won the long game. They didn't tire their mounts. They knew the terrain. They could adapt, slip through tight passes, navigate mudslides, and stubborn sheep. And they could do it all with a raisin in their cheek. That small, unassuming fruit was more than food. It was a quiet ally. In a world without caffeine, it was a pick-me-up. In a system without central heating or cushioned boots, it was a reminder that sweetness existed even on the hardest days. There's something beautiful about that. You step off the road now, just slightly. To your left, a smooth stone slab overlooks a distant valley bathed in orange light. You sit, exhale, and let your body soften. The wind brushes past like a friend who doesn't need to speak. Below, the shadows of ancient paths wind between fields, ruins, and sleeping trees. You can almost see them couriers moving steadily along the veins of empire, scrolls clutched, heads down, hearts forward. They don't know what's in the messages, they just know it matters. And now you do too. You close your eyes, the air is cool, tinged with mint and memory. Your limbs feel heavy, your thoughts slow. Everything moves gently. The road doesn't end, it just quiets. And maybe that's all any message needs to be carried carefully from one moment to the next. So now let everything soften. Let the sounds of the old Persian road fade to whispers, the sandals and dust, the hum of footsteps, the rustle of a scroll unrolled in the candlelight of some long-gone station. You're far from the empire now, but its rhythm lingers in you, in the steady pace you've kept through this story, in the quiet thoughts that stretch like shadows at day's end. Breathe in, let your body feel heavier. Let the journey settle into your bones like a blanket pulled up on a cool night. The couriers are all gone now, their sandals worn through their scrolls delivered their names mostly lost to time. But the care they carried, the trust, the message, the motion remains. It hums in every road that still connects people, in every simple task done with purpose, in every quiet mile walked because it meant something. You are part of that now. A traveler not by foot, but by story. And stories have a way of reaching their destination even in the dark. So let your breath slow. Let the stars drift where they may. Let the road fade beneath you, not ending, just continuing on in silence. And let yourself drift with it, softly, quietly, restfully.